Hello everybody! In 1994, when the Blue Blur finally got to go foot to fist with the new porcupine on the block with the buff chest, we also got to see an absolutely jaw-dropping piece of pixel artwork in the background. Years later, fans of the games and lore thought they had found a hidden connection between this pixel portrait and Shadow. And when Gerald's journal dropped for Cross Shadow Generations, those fans went feral. But what if I told you that this is one of the most misrepresented pieces of lore in the game, and that by properly exploring it will not only prove that theory wrong, but also help to build on an entirely different one that might further join some obscure pieces of lore back into the main narrative. Welcome back to Loops and Lore. I'm Ben, and today we have some deep lore to discuss, from both the classic, modern, and beyond, in order to figure out if the Hidden Palace is the birthplace of one legend or two. First, let's discuss the wall from Hidden Palace Zone. It's not clear if this is a tapestry, a painting, or something else, so I'll be referring to it simply as an image. The show don't tell philosophy of Sonic 3 and Knuckles is top-notch, even today. But it's the second half of the game that really cranks things up, particularly once we drop into Lava Reef Zone. It's here that we see the crashed Death Egg looming in the background like a sleeping dragon in its lava-filled cave. Only to get close and have to face its fiery gaze and try to outrun its wrath. After a brief cooldown from all that intensity, as the Death Egg begins to take flight, we finally get to blow off some steam with the rival we've been on the receiving end of for nearly 2 games, Knuckles. And it's here that we get a fourth incredible storytelling set piece in a row. The image shows what looks like Sonic, but if he was wearing clothes from a long forgotten era, equipped with a pair of rings and enveloped in a ball of golden flame. On the other side, we see that he is fighting against a villainous looking creature with large eyes, nose, and even a mustache. It has 2 outstretched arms, one holding the Master Emerald and the other ready to fend off the glowing hero. But looking more closely, the evil creature is not a creature at all, but a machine. Small details like rivets, gears, circuitry, and an engine indicates that this image was clearly created by someone from long ago who didn't quite understand what they had seen. While Sonic games have had images and structures that hint at past civilizations before, such as in Marble Zone, Labyrinth Zone, and all over Little Planet and other parts of Angel Island, what makes this one unique is that it is not simply a piece of repeating background art or a level asset. This image only appears here, and we only get to see it as we are actively fighting Knuckles. Afterwards, we immediately try to stop Eggman from taking the Master Emerald, and when we return to the Hidden Palace and Knuckles story, we don't come back to this room. It's awesome to see so much care and detail put into something that would be seen for such a short piece of time, and is perhaps part of what has lent it to remain so important in the minds of many Sonic fans. Once Sonic Adventure Story shed some light on the past of the Echidnas, we figured we could fill in the rest of the blanks. Someone, presumably a surviving member of the Echidnas who was still on the island prior to Knuckles' birth, received a vision or dream and made this piece afterwards. We see this prophecy contained in the image come true during the good ending of the game, which makes it feel like there isn't anything more to get out of it. Or is there? Years later, in the modern era, some fans began to speculate that perhaps Gerald Robotnik had based Shadow the Hedgehog off of this image, or that this is actually a prophecy of Shadow and not Sonic at all. The basis for this theory comes from Shadow's spines resembling that of Super Sonic, as well as Shadow possessing wings while in Doom form in Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, and the presence of a functional shrine of the Master Emerald located in a hidden area of the Ark. There wasn't much else to base this theory on, until Gerald's journal appeared in Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, explaining the recreation of the shrine on the Ark. Fans took this and ran, assuming that if Gerald had been to Angel Island, he must have seen the image in Hidden Palace Zone. Ironically, this is also where this theory falls apart. First, let's cover the less important note, that Shadow's turned up spines were obviously meant to hint at how much energy is moving through his body, only being kept in check by his limiter rings and giving him that edgy bad boy look. Gerald didn't design his spines to stick up like Sonic's do in super form. They're doing so because of how much energy is constantly moving through Shadow's body. The figure shown in the image is also blue. Clearly, this is meant to be Sonic, and the presence of wings is there to represent not literal wings, but that he is flying. The image was obviously made by someone from an ancient culture, as is apparent by looking at the Eggman Robo. Whomever made it may have seen a vision of the future, or been told it by someone else, and done their best to recreate it. Not only in an honest way, but one that would enable others to understand what was happening just by looking at it. So no, this image has nothing to do with Shadow or his Doom powers. But even if you wanted to try to argue this further, it's pointless for two reasons. The first is because while Gerald did see the Master Emerald, he never visited the Hidden Palace Zone, and the journal confirms this. In Sonic & Knuckles, the Master Emerald is being kept hidden in this ancient palace, but that was not its original location, nor was it its last. The Master Emerald was originally on the Starfall Islands, or somewhere near that area, and later moved elsewhere before ending up in the care of the Echidnas. There it rested in the shrine, the ruins of which Gerald saw. It is then moved to Hidden Palace for the events of Sonic & Knuckles, and later moved back to the ruins where we see it resting from Superstars onwards. From what we can tell, it's doubtful that anyone visited Angel Island from the moment it was first thrown skyward up until Gerald's arrival. And whoever was the current guardian probably moved it to the Hidden Palace after Gerald's visit for fear it would be stolen by future visitors. A short cutscene that occurs in the Origins version of the story between Sonic 2 and 3 shows Eggman surviving the fall from space by crashing his Egg Robo through the mountains and into Hidden Palace, making the discovery a complete accident. After the events of 3 and Knuckles, Knuckles probably didn't feel it was any safer there than in the original place his ancestors had kept it, and also probably assumed he would have an easier line of sight of any potential future thieves. Didn't really pan out, but it's Knuckles. He tried. This does make sense narratively as to why the Emerald would be seen on the shrine by Gerald, and then moved for the events of 3 and Knuckles, and then back out again for the events of Sonic Adventure, where, again, we get to see just how well Knuckles' plan worked. Furthermore, in his journal, Gerald does go on to say that he saw several different biomes that were close together, but he also said his time on the island was short, and the wording suggests he wasn't there for long enough to even begin exploring. Gerald doesn't move at the speed of sound after all, and as far as we know, the most direct route to Hidden Palace is to first reach Sandopolis, exploring the pyramids, make your way into Lava Reef, and then finally the Hidden Zone, all while avoiding traps and hazards along the way. Even taking out that there wouldn't be that many since Eggman hadn't arrived yet, there would still be natural environmental hazards and, of course, traps left behind by the Echidnas. It's also important to note that most of Sonic's routes show signs of Eggman having been there along the same path, helping to pave some of the routes we can take. Gerald doesn't have this to go off of, or Sonic's variety of abilities, so it's almost impossible that he would have had enough time to make it down to the palace. And if he did, it's certainly not mentioned in the journal, where he states that he could never forget the sight of the Master Emerald. He mentions nothing about the Hidden Palace, only the shrine that isn't in the same location. We could make the argument that Gerald did see the hidden palace and that this was redacted, as we see much of the journal has been, but again, there's no reason to believe he ever made it that far either way. With all this gathered information, we can say with almost definite certainty that no, Gerald never saw the image, and so it could never have inspired any part of Shadow. The second reason that this is kind of pointless is because the fans want to link this image to Shadow. And they're kind of onto something, specifically that Shadow could have been inspired by Sonic, but it's not at all what you think. In two separate conversations, I have lined out two things. One, that Sonic's original lore depicted him as a storybook character willed to life by his connections to the memories of a beloved father, husband, and test pilot who broke the speed of sound in 1947 before being immediately and tragically lost. And two, that Maria was likely deeply in love with the culture of Earth during her day, which may have been very similar to ours, and given the implied timeline, would have placed her on the Ark during the 1950s, which was the same time that rocket-inspired design and roller skating were both incredibly popular, lending to how she was inspired to design Shadow's air shoes, which are essentially rocket skates. Notice how these two events sync up almost perfectly. In the original lore, the creator of the storybook version of Sonic was already an established and well-known author prior to the loss of her husband, the spiky-haired pilot nicknamed Hedgehog, for which she based Sonic's character on. We are told she tells stories about Sonic to her daughter, and these stories grow to become more expansive as time goes on, again, prior to the events that lead to the tragic loss of her husband, the test pilot. It's not clear how much time occurs between the start of these stories and the accident, but if the storyteller was already an established writer, she may have already published some of them, or done so shortly afterwards, in order to honor her late husband's memory. And since her work was well known, Maria may have already been a fan of her writing, or discovered it in time for it to have influenced her. We know from Gerald's journal that he was using Maria's designs for Shadow's accessories, practically lifting them right off the page and bringing her drawings to life. So it's entirely possible that it may have been Maria who chose for Shadow to be a hedgehog, inspired by the well-known and loved character of the stories whom she may have wished she could meet and go on adventures with. And if not for the DNA of the black arms, Shadow may have looked far more similar to another hedgehog whom he already suspiciously resembles. Going back to that original lore, it doesn't have Sonic actually coming to life until the 80s, meaning that if this theory was true, then someone, presumably an ancient echidna, would have had a vision of Super Sonic fighting Eggman for the fate of the Master Emerald and Angel Island long before the man who inspired Sonic's character was ever born. A character who would then go on to inspire the creation of Shadow before coming to life itself some 30 years after. And later, Sonic would then have to fight Shadow, the very being he inspired, before joining forces in order to save the Earth from a creature that had been created before either of them had been born. A creature whose DNA had been modified using research from the monster who had destroyed the homes of the echidnas who would create that prophetic image of Super Sonic in the first place. So, in a way, it's still connected after all. Gerald may never have been to Hidden Palace, but the idea for Shadow may have still been inspired by Sonic anyway. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that both Sonic and Shadow were inspired by the same spiky-haired hedgehog. Either way, I'm Ben. This has been Loops and Lore. Thanks for watching.